You can be a part of God's plan. You know, God's plan, that's His plan one-on-one. And it worked. Within 30 years, Rome itself was taking notice. Israel was saying, what's going on? The whole world was being turned upside down by the power of God in these few people who was saying, I want to partner with God in His work and be a part of His kingdom. Called to greatness. I believe every single Christian is called to greatness. I believe that every one of us is destined and planned by God to live a life that's extraordinary, that is beyond the mundane things of this world. He has called us to greatness. He's called us to greatness. Turn to James chapter 5, verse 20. James chapter 5, verse 20 says, let him know that he which converteth the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death and shall hide a multitude of sins. Let him know that he which converteth the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death and shall hide a multitude of sin. Called to greatness. We all have a desire to be a part of something that is eternal. Something that's much bigger than we are. Something that will make a difference. Something that will change the world. Something that will make the world a better place. That's what college students, if you ask them, they say, we want to make the world a better place. We want to leave our mark upon the world. We want to make a mark, and we want to be a part of something that's bigger and larger than we are. We want to make a difference. We all aspire to live a life of greatness, something that will last. You know, last year's champion is pretty much forgotten. If I ask you right now, who won the Super Bowl in 1990? I don't know if there's anybody here that could even tell me who won it. I mean, that's been, my goodness, that's 25 years ago. Seems like yesterday. I was talking one day with our former youth pastor, Pastor John, and I said something about Jerry Butler, the Iceman. He said, who? I said, Jerry Butler, the Iceman. He said, I've never heard of him. I said, he was at the University of Georgia, had a big concert. The place was packed. He said, I've never heard of him. You know, last year's big names fade away, and nobody knows of them. Nobody remembers them. But living a life of greatness will make an impact. The children that you revolve your life around need you less and less with each passing year. But you have a feeling in your heart that you are being called to greatness for which you were created. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 3 says, He humbled you, causing you to hunger and then feeding you with manna that your fathers knew not of. He humbled you. He caused you to hunger, and then he fed you with manna that your fathers did not know. God made them hungry. He made them hungry for what he wanted to bring about in their life. He did. He made them hungry for what he wanted to do in their life, and he caused them to have a hunger for that thing. In Luke chapter 1, verse 53, Mary says he has filled the hungry with good things. He has filled the hungry with good things. Is God trying to stir something up in you? Is he trying to stir something up in you to cause you to have a hunger? Are you being called to greatness? I think God is trying to bring a revival to Parkway. I believe he is trying. He is offering. He is putting it before us. But he needs us to desire it, to hunger it. We need a hunger for God, and then God will fill that hunger. Amen. Amen. He will fill that hunger. Now, I know I've told you this before, but if any of you have been to Disney World, and I know I haven't been in years, seems like a long time, since my kids were little. But I used to go when my kids were little, and there was one ride there that will get into your head and you cannot get it out. It's a small, small world. You know, when you go in the summertime, that ride is air conditioned, it's cool, and you will ride that ride just because it's cool and it's air conditioned and you can get out of the heat and you'll get in. And they got little people from all over the world, and they're singing, "It's a small world after all. It's a small," and you know, the bad thing, you get off of that ride and all day you're thinking, "It's a small world after." Everywhere. You find yourself singing it in the line to buy a hot dog. It's a small world. No. But you know, we get so caught up in it's a small world. Did you know that most of us live in a very small world? Did you know that we go to work? We've got 5 friends or 4 friends, and we associate with them, and then we come home, and then we do this, and we have did you know we have our routines? We have our routines. We do our little things. We do all these things, and we live in a very, very small world. We live in a very small world. But God is trying to break us out of the small existence, the small world that we live in. God is calling us to live a life of meaning, a life of purpose, to live an intentional life, to live a life that will impact lives, that will change the course of destiny for other human beings. He is calling us to change the future and change eternity for people and their lives. Number 1, God has set eternity in our hearts. In Ecclesiastes 3:11, he says, God has set eternity in our hearts. God has set, we are eternal. We're an eternal being. We are three in one. We're spirit, soul, and body. One day you were born. You had never existed before. There was no DD. There was no Greg. You know, there was no Nathan. But you were born, and from that moment, you will eternally exist somewhere. The only question is where. You will exist. You will be here somewhere. The only question is where. And then, you know, it's appointed unto man once to die, and then the judgment, you know that. But the second death, where men go into hell forever and ever. He says, for those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life, the second death hath no power over them, but we are passed from death unto life, and we live with Christ. Amen. We live with Him. We're three in one. There is something in our hearts. There's something in us that can never be satisfied by the earthly, temporal things. God gives you an appetite for eternal things that will outlast this world in which we live. Material things can never satisfy you. The hunger for the things of God will grow. Let me give you an example. Let me give you a quick example. You remember Moses? Everybody should remember Moses. Watched a football game last night. One of the players on the other team was named Pharaoh. And I said, I wonder if his brother is Moses. I wonder if anybody ever comes up to him and says, let my people go. I don't know. He didn't let too much go last night. But you know, Moses was living a small life on the backside of the desert. He tried his way and failed. He went to the backside of the desert. He married. He had a family. He was keeping some sheep. He had a regular routine. He went out to keep the sheep every morning. He kept them. He watched them. He carried them back. He had his little routine. He was in a small world. And he loved it. And nobody bothered him. And he didn't risk anything. He was just in his small world, living his little life, and he was great. But God came to him and said, Moses, I've got something greater. I have something far greater than this life. I have called you to be a rescuer. I have called you to rescue the lost, to rescue your people from Egypt. Moses, in I believe it's Exodus chapter 3, verses 10 and 11. He says, come now, I will send you unto Pharaoh that you may bring my people out of Egypt. And Moses said, who, me? Can you get somebody else to do this? Hey, could you get a trained professional to do this? Could you get somebody else? Who, me? God says, Moses, I have called you to a life of greatness. I have called you so that your name will be known throughout the ages and throughout all of time. I have called you from the small world you're living in. I have called you to greatness. I have called you to a great task. And God is calling you. He's calling you and me and all of us to a great task, to something that is enormous, to something. He's calling us to join Him in His purpose. Remember, there's no greater difference that a person can make than to help someone make it to heaven. Secondly, Jesus demonstrated the pattern. His first act after he was baptized was to find somebody and reveal himself to them. Do you get that? Jesus' first act, he found Philip. He found Philip. And he revealed himself unto Philip. This was the method of salvation. It was one-on-one. It was brother reaching brother. It was sister reaching sister. It was one-on-one. Andrew findeth Peter. What example is this that you can find, that you can be a part of God's plan? You know, God's plan, that's His plan, one-on-one. And it worked. Within 30 years, Rome itself was taking notice. Israel was saying, what's going on? The whole world was being turned upside down by the power of God in these few people who was saying, I want to partner with God in His work and be a part of His kingdom. This is the message, partnering with God, partnering with Him. The plan has a name. It's called, what is it called? Fishers of men. Fishers of men. He said, I will make you fishers of men. You will catch them one at a time. This one will catch that one. This one, that one. They will bring 2. They will bring 4. And it will multiply and multiply. Oh, he went to, did you know Jesus didn't go to the temple and recruit his people? He didn't get any scribes, Pharisees, temple workers. He didn't get any of these people. He went to Galilee. He found some fishermen. Can you believe he found fishermen? The worst, if I were giving him advice and picking some disciples, I would have picked some doctors, some people with great credentials. He picked the lowest, the working men. He picked the guy who works with his hands and sweats. People say, well, I just pray that a preacher will come by and can minister to those people. God has called you to minister to them. God has called you, everyday people, to minister. You say, but I don't have all the education. God has called you who can live with them, work with them. They can see you. Every single Christian is called to this job, to this important event. D.L. Moody, you might remember, he came from a very poor family. He was from a very, very poor family. He went to work as a teenager, as a shoe salesman, because he had to make some money. God called him into the ministry. D.L. Moody said, you don't want me. I don't have any education. I don't have any training. I don't have anything. But God said, I want you. You know what D.L. Moody said? He said, okay, God, I'm going to see what you can do with a man who will give himself entirely to God. And God used D.L. Moody to become one of the greatest evangelists this continent and even Europe has ever seen, right up to Billy Graham. D.L. Moody gave himself to God. You may say, well, what about that? Well, secondly, many think that they're on an excursion boat. Many think they get on the boat, they get kicked back, they got a deck chair, they're checking out the lemonade. Hey, what's for dessert tonight? Hey, Could I have another lemon? Did you know people come in and say, hey, I wonder what this church can offer me. I wonder what they can give me. I wonder what their youth program, I wonder what this program. I don't like the songs the choir sings. I wish they would sing these songs. I wish they would do this. They're checking. Did you know God has called us to a fishing boat, not a cruise ship? A fishing boat. We're to be fishers of men. We're to live an intentional life. We're to pray. We're to fast. We're to get in the gap. We're to hold on for the lost and the dying. We're to hold on to call them back. We're to cling to God. We're to call them from the edges, the precipice of hell. We're to believe God. We're not on a cruise ship. We're on a fishing boat. Fishing is hard, but God has called us to do the work. Amen. Amen. You may remember Leonard Skutnik, Air Florida, January 1982. An Air Florida plane taking off from Washington had ice on the wings, and the plane came down. Leonard was just walking along the river. He was just walking on the way home from work. And he saw the plane coming down. And he saw it hit the bridge and tumble into the water. And he saw people crawling out in the icy waters. He saw them tumbling out. He saw them getting on the wings. He saw them clinging. He said, man, I better go call 911. I better get a professional fireman like Randy Cosnahan. We need him. We need some firemen here. No. Leonard Skutnik said, these people are dying. They're dying. And he took off his coat and he dove into the water and he reached a woman who was clinging to a piece of the airplane and he swam back to the shore with her. He turned around. There was another one that was slipping off. He dove back in. He swam to them. He helped them. He didn't sit there and say, oh my, I wish we had some professional rescuers. He jumped in. He offered himself. He saw the lost, the dying, the hurting, and he jumped in. How many of us are called to be rescuers? How many of us are called? Spiritual destruction is worse than physical death. Have you thrown out the lifeline? Oh, we sing, I love you, Lord. Oh, I love you, Lord. Sunday morning for an hour. Then let's head to the restaurant and let's forget about it. No. God said, where is the cry? Where is the burden? Where is the urgency in our lives? You will receive a blessing when you are instrumental in helping someone find Christ. You will find a blessing like nothing you've ever known. Luke chapter 15, verse 10. Luke chapter 15, verse 10. He says, the angels rejoice over one sinner who comes home. Because why? Because they are looking from eternity. They're not looking at this little life. They are looking from the standpoint of eternity. They are looking and they're rejoicing over one sinner who comes home. That's what it says. Him who converts a sinner from the error of his ways will cover a multitude of sins. Proverbs 11:30 says, he that winneth souls is wise. You know, there's something wonderful happens when I get on God's team. Did you know that God's heart God's heart is to win the lost. It's to win the lost. His message, his heart is to... Luke 19:10, I believe it is, says, I have come to seek and to save that which was lost. All we like sheep have gone astray. We've turned everyone to his own way. The wages of sin is death. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. God's message is rescue them while there's yet time. Throw it all aside. Forget everything. Rescue them. When I get on God's team, God puts his arm around me, says, let's go get them. And we work together in tandem. Amen. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. In the play 1776, it's a crucial play. It's a play about the Declaration of Independence, about all that went in. John Adams, who I believe was our second president, is standing there. The Pennsylvania, the South Carolina delegations are in turmoil. Another delegation. And he's standing there on the night before they reached an agreement. And he's looking around. And he knows that at least 3 delegations disagree. He says, oh God, does anybody see what I see? Is anybody there? Does anybody care? Does anybody see what I see? I think Jesus Christ is right here. I think he's saying, does anybody care? Does anybody see what I see? Is anybody there? He's saying to us, do you care? Can you see what I see? If you want God to put his arm around you, if you want him to say, praise God, I'm glad you're on my team. I'm going to help you out. You get in the business of winning. How do you do it? I can't tell you right now, but you live an intentional life. You live an intentional life. You put yourself in positions to win the lost. You pray, you fast, you seek God, you invite friends, you work for God, you give it to God. You say, oh God, I'm going to rescue the perishing. I'm going. I'm called out of my small world. Who? Me? That's what Moses said. Not me. But God said, yes, you. I'm calling you.